You've probably heard stories about people who encounter strangers in the most unlikely of circumstances, those mysterious figures who seem to appear out of nowhere, offering help when it's needed most. But what if I told you that one such encounter might not be as simple as it seems? What if I told you that the stranger who helped a woman stranded in the middle of a fierce storm was no ordinary man at all? Stick with me, because by the end of this story, you're going to be questioning everything you thought you knew about fate, coincidence, and the nature of kindness. Imagine this: you're driving down a lonely stretch of highway, the rain pouring down in sheets, the wind howling as though it's trying to tear the world apart. It's late, too late to be out on the road, but you've got a destination in mind. The headlights cut through the stormy darkness, and the road seems to stretch endlessly before you. But then it happens: the car stutters, the engine sputters, and with one final groan, it dies. You try to restart it, turning the key over and over, hoping for some miracle, but the engine refuses to respond. It's just you, the car, and the storm. Alone. At that moment, fear creeps in, doesn't it? The kind of fear that sits heavy in your stomach, twisting your gut. But it's not just the fear of being stranded, though that's terrifying enough, it's the uncertainty. The storm's relentless. The world feels dangerous and uncertain. You're unsure whether anyone will find you. Now, imagine you're standing by your car, trying to make a decision about what to do next. Do you wait for help that might never come? Do you risk walking for miles to find a phone or a safe place? Time seems to stretch out, the storm crashing down around you, the air thick with the kind of silence that makes you question your own thoughts. Then, out of nowhere, a figure appears in the rain. You can barely make out his face in the dark, but there's something about him, something reassuring. He doesn't look like the typical person you'd expect to see on the side of the road. There's no hesitation in his steps, no sign of uncertainty. It's as if he knows exactly where he's going, exactly what needs to be done. Without a word, he approaches your car, his presence calm, almost otherworldly. You don't know whether to feel relieved or wary. This is not a normal situation. There's something different about him. And here's where the story gets strange: this man, the one who should be a lifeline in your darkest hour, turns out to be far more than a kind Samaritan. He's no ordinary man. You won't believe what happens next. And trust me, the reason you clicked on this video wasn't just to hear a story about a good Samaritan. No, you're here because something inside you is already sensing that there's a twist to this tale, a twist that will challenge everything you thought you knew about what's real and what isn't. Before I dive into what happens next, let me ask you this: have you ever felt like something or someone was watching over you, guiding you in ways you couldn't explain? Like there's something, some hidden force, that intervenes in your life at just the right moment? What if I told you this isn't just a coincidence? What if I told you that there's more to life than meets the eye, and sometimes, the people who come into our lives at the most unexpected times are the ones who are meant to change our course forever? The storm rages on. The stranger stands in front of you, looking at your broken-down car, and then, without warning, he reaches into his coat, pulling out something that will make you question everything. You didn't ask for this help, but now it seems like you have no choice but to accept it. So, you take a leap of faith, trusting this man who, in the middle of a downpour, seems to know exactly what to do. And that's when the real mystery begins. What is this man's secret? Why does he seem to be so prepared, so in tune with the universe at that exact moment? Is he really just a kind-hearted stranger, or is there something more to him than meets the eye? These questions are about to lead us down a path that will leave you questioning the very nature of reality itself. Stick with me, because we're just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. So, what does this man do? How does he help you, and more importantly, what happens when you realize that the help he offers might be more than just fixing a car in a storm? By the end of this video, you'll have answers to questions you didn't even know you had. But the biggest question of all remains: who is this man, and what does he want from you? Before we continue, I want you to think about something. What would you do if someone like him showed up in your life, someone who doesn't just change your day but changes your entire outlook on life? Someone whose very existence seems to defy logic and reason? This isn't just a story about a stranger on the side of the road. It's about the unknown forces that may be at work behind the scenes, shaping your fate in ways you've never even imagined. I know you're dying to find out what happens next, but I need you to stick around. The answers are coming. And when they do, everything you thought you knew about the world, about strangers, about fate, and about destiny will be turned upside down. Stay with me. You won't want to miss the reveal. End of introduction. Cliffhanger. The storm intensifies, and the stranger begins to speak, his words so unexpected that they'll leave you questioning everything. What he says next changes everything, your understanding of reality, and what you thought you knew about fate, will never be the same again. The rain pounded against the windows like a drum, relentless and unforgiving, as the stranger stood there, staring at the broken-down car. You couldn't help but feel a sense of unease, the kind that crawls up your spine and makes your skin prickle. Something about him was different, almost too calm for someone who had just appeared out of nowhere on a dark, stormy night. The last few days had been a blur of tension and unease, and this moment, in the midst of the storm, felt like it was part of something bigger, a story that had already begun without you even realizing it. You hadn't been out on the road for long before everything fell apart. It had been a stressful week, a week full of doubts, phone calls that went unanswered, texts that were left unread. There was a lot going on in your life that you didn't want to talk about. You had just moved to the area a few months ago, hoping for a fresh start after everything went south. The new job, the new place, the promise of a better life, everything was supposed to fall into place, but nothing ever does it? It was supposed to be a fresh chapter, yet it felt more like you were running away from something rather than toward something better. The truth is, you didn't have much left to hold on to. And then, just as quickly as the question came, it was gone. But his presence lingered. Was it because of the storm? Was it because of the quiet, steady rain? Or was it something about him that made you feel like you were being watched in a way you couldn't explain? As he worked on the car, you couldn't help but wonder if he was just a good Samaritan, someone who happened to be passing by and offered his help out of sheer kindness, or if there was something more to this encounter. A part of you wanted to believe in the goodness of strangers, that there was nothing more to this moment than the simple act of someone helping another in need. But something inside you refused to let it go. This man, this stranger, he was too calm, too sure of himself in the midst of a storm that had sent most sane people running for cover. And then, just when you thought you might get some answers, he paused, his hands resting on the hood of your car, as though he were contemplating something far more important than just the engine in front of him. Sometimes, he said slowly, not looking at you but staring ahead into the storm, the road you take doesn't always lead to where you expect. What did that mean? The road you take. This wasn't some metaphor you were ready for. You weren't in the mood for riddles. Was he suggesting that this was all fate, that your car breaking down in the middle of nowhere wasn't just a random event? You felt the tension grow thick in the air, and you didn't know if it was the storm outside or the one brewing inside your mind. Was he trying to tell you something about your life, about the choices you'd made that had led you here, in this moment, with him? Or was it just a meaningless remark, meant to fill the silence between strangers? You couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a chance encounter. As he finished working on the car, he stood up, wiping his hands, and for the first time, you saw his face clearly. He wasn't just a man in a rain-soaked coat. His face held an expression that seemed strangely ageless, as if he'd lived 1,000 lives and could see the world in ways that no one else could. And then, just as quickly as he'd come, he was done. The car was fixed, miraculously so. You hadn't heard any tools, any clicks, or anything to indicate he was even doing much to repair it. It was as if the car had simply healed itself under his touch. It was almost too good to be true. And yet, there it was, your car, running like nothing had ever happened. But something wasn't right. His smile. It wasn't one of triumph or kindness. It was knowing. Too knowing. You should be careful on the road, he said, his voice low but steady. Not everyone you meet is as they seem. And with that, he turned and walked away, vanishing into the storm without another word. You sat there for a long time, unable to process what had just happened. It didn't feel like a normal encounter. It felt like something had shifted, like you had just crossed some invisible line that would change everything from here on out. Who was this man? What did he mean by his cryptic words? And more importantly, what had just happened to you? You couldn't shake the sense that you were being drawn into something much bigger than a simple stormy night and a broken car. And as you drove away, the rain still hammering against your windshield, you couldn't stop wondering, was this just the beginning? Or was there something else lurking beneath the surface, something that was now following you, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? Something told you this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next few days felt like a blur, as if the encounter with the stranger had been some sort of surreal fever dream. You tried to shake it off, rationalize it away as a bizarre coincidence, but the feeling of unease lingered, gnawing at you. Your car was running perfectly, but there was something unsettling about the way it had been fixed. No sounds, no tools, no effort on his part. Just an instantaneous repair. You kept replaying the words he had said in your head, "Not everyone you meet is as they seem." What did that even mean? And more importantly, why did it feel like you were being warned about something you couldn't quite put your finger on? But you couldn't just forget about it. The sense of foreboding refused to leave you, and the more you thought about it, the more questions you had. Who was that man? What was his connection to you? To the storm? You didn't want to admit it, but deep down, you knew that whatever had happened on that road wasn't random. It felt like a catalyst, something that had set off a chain of events that you couldn't control. The first thing you did was check your car's maintenance records. You figured it was possible the repair had been made by the previous owner, maybe it had been serviced recently, and you hadn't noticed, but as you went through the paperwork, you found something odd. There was no record of any recent repair, nothing that explained the sudden and flawless fix. The last note in the file was dated almost a year ago, when the car had been bought. No indication of anything that would have kept the car in working condition as it was now. You froze. There was no way the car should be running like this. You went back outside to check it again, and sure enough, the engine hummed as if it had been newly tuned. The mystery deepened. But it didn't stop there. The next day, you came home to find that something had been moved inside your apartment. Nothing big, just a few items on your desk, a book that was slightly out of place, but it was enough to make you stop in your tracks. You didn't know why, but a chill ran down your spine. You double-checked your locks and looked out the windows, half expecting to see someone standing in the shadows. Nothing. It was late, and the city was quiet, but the air felt heavy with a strange tension. Something was off. You felt watched, like the storm hadn't passed yet, and whatever had come with it was still out there, lingering. The next morning, you decided to visit the mechanic. If anyone could explain what had happened to your car, it would be them. The place looked run down, with oil-stained floors and an assortment of tools scattered around. A gruff man named Frank was working behind the counter, flipping through a pile of receipts. He looked up as you walked in, his expression flat. "How can I help you?" he asked, not even bothering to take a second glance at you. You explained what had happened, about the strange encounter and the way your car had been miraculously repaired. Frank raised an eyebrow, but then something in his expression changed. He looked around, almost as if to make sure no one was listening, before leaning closer. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice, "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I wouldn't go looking into that guy. You don't want to get involved with people like him." His words hit you like a punch to the stomach. People like him? Who was he talking about? Frank was normally a no-nonsense guy, never one to beat around the bush, but this felt different. You tried to ask him what he meant, but Frank suddenly straightened up, wiping his hands on a rag and turning away. "You didn't hear it from me," he muttered, "but you should just let this one go. For your own good." You stood there for a moment, stunned. The warning was clear, but why would Frank react like that? What was so dangerous about this stranger? And what had he meant when he said, "people like him"? Before you could ask any more questions, Frank turned his back and walked off, leaving you standing there, more confused than ever. The whole interaction felt like a red flag, but you couldn't quite figure out why. Had Frank been scared? Or was he hiding something from you? As if that wasn't enough, when you returned home, you went to grab the small notebook where you jotted down the details of your encounter with the stranger, the things he'd said, the way he'd looked, the feeling you'd had, but when you opened it, the pages were blank. Every word you'd written was gone, as if it had never been there. You turned the pages back and forth, desperately trying to find the notes, but there was nothing. It was like the notebook had erased itself. You froze. You could clearly remember writing everything down. You'd even written the exact words the stranger had said. But now, nothing. You tried to tell yourself it was just a weird coincidence, maybe you'd mistaken something, maybe you'd written it in a daze, or maybe you'd just forgotten. But deep down, you knew that wasn't it. This wasn't just a mistake. The more you thought about it, the more the unease grew. Something had erased the evidence. And then, just as you thought things couldn't get stranger, your phone rang. The caller ID was unknown, but something in the back of your mind told you not to pick up. You hesitated, but then the phone buzzed again. You answered. "Stop looking," a cold voice said on the other end, the words cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're digging in the wrong places. Leave it alone." The line went dead. Your heart was pounding now. You sat there, trying to process everything, the stranger, the missing evidence, the cryptic warning, and the words that echoed in your mind. Stop looking. What did that even mean? Who was that on the phone? Was it the same person who had fixed your car? Or someone else entirely? You felt like you were being pulled into a web, tangled in something much bigger than you could have ever imagined. Every clue, every warning, every strange encounter felt like it was leading you somewhere, but the more you tried to uncover the truth, the more obstacles appeared. Was someone actively trying to stop you from finding out what really happened that night? And why? One thing was certain, whatever was going on, it wasn't just a random storm or a chance encounter with a helpful stranger. There was something deeply wrong, something hidden beneath the surface, and you couldn't stop yourself from wanting to uncover it. But the more you dug, the more the mystery deepened, and now, you weren't just questioning what had happened, you were questioning who was behind it all, and why they were willing to go to such extremes to stop you from finding out the truth. But just as you thought you might be getting closer to the answers, you noticed something out of the corner of your eye, a figure standing across the street, watching you from the shadows. The figure didn't move, just stood there, unmoving. You could barely make out their face, but the moment your eyes met theirs, a chill ran through you. You had the distinct feeling that this person knew something about everything, and just like the rest, they didn't want you to know the truth. And in that moment, the realization hit you, you weren't just being watched. You were being hunted. The figure across the street didn't move, not even when you turned to stare for what felt like an eternity. It was like a part of you instinctively knew that whatever this person was, they were part of the bigger puzzle you hadn't yet fully unraveled. The streetlights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows across the pavement, but the figure remained still, watching you. You felt your pulse quicken as you slowly stepped back into the apartment, locking the door behind you. You couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, waiting, observing every move you made. Whoever they were, they had to be connected to the storm, to the stranger, to everything that had been happening since that night. But what really set your heart racing wasn't just the figure watching from the shadows. It was the cold realization that you weren't in this alone. You weren't the only one who was being dragged into whatever this was. It didn't take long for the strange, unexplainable events to ripple out and touch someone else connected to you, someone you had known for years, someone who should have been a safe harbor in this storm. You hadn't spoken to your sister in weeks. She'd been busy with her own life, but you knew her well enough to know when something was wrong. When you finally picked up the phone to call her, the tone in her voice immediately told you that she was hiding something. "Hey, what's going on?" you asked, trying to keep your tone casual, though you could hear the tension in your own voice. "Nothing. Everything's fine," she replied quickly, but the words were too fast, too rehearsed. She was lying, and you knew it. You pushed, pressing her gently, but she remained tight-lipped until finally, after a long pause, she blurted out, "I got a weird message today. Someone said I needed to stay away from you. They said you're involved in something dangerous, something I can't even begin to understand. That I shouldn't talk to you anymore." You felt the blood drain from your face. It was the same warning. The same voice. The same message that had come to you just days earlier. The same eerie command to stay away. "Who sent this message?" you asked, the words barely leaving your lips. Your sister hesitated, the silence stretching too long. Finally, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper, as if afraid someone might overhear. "I don't know. I couldn't see their face. But it was unsettling. They told me I'd get a call soon, but I didn't listen to them. I think she stopped, her breath catching in her throat. I think I'm being watched, too. You could hear the fear in her voice now. It was the same fear you had been feeling, the same dread that had settled into your bones ever since the stranger appeared. You knew deep down that whatever was happening wasn't just about you. Your sister was connected to it somehow, whether by fate or design, and now she was caught in the same web of uncertainty. You tried to comfort her, assuring her that everything would be fine, but you both knew that wasn't true. How could it be? You were both being hunted by some unseen force, pushed into corners, and threatened with vague warnings. And just like that, the stakes escalated. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore, it was about survival. You hung up the phone with your sister, but the unease didn't fade. Instead, it multiplied. You couldn't ignore the feeling that something was closing in on you, tightening like a noose around your neck. You needed answers, but the more you dug, the more you found that the world around you was full of contradictions. Nothing made sense anymore. It wasn't just about the mysterious stranger anymore, it was about why he had chosen you and what kind of danger you were really in. What had he meant when he said, "Not everyone you meet is as they seem"? Who was watching you both, and why? The next day, you decided to do something you'd been avoiding for weeks. You went to your old friend's house. Mark had been someone you trusted, someone you had shared your life with during a more innocent time before everything got complicated. You figured if anyone could offer you some insight into what was happening, it would be him. Mark had always been the kind of guy who saw patterns where others saw chaos, who believed in uncovering the hidden truths. But when you arrived at his apartment, you found a note slipped under his door. It was short, a simple phrase scrawled in messy handwriting: "Stay away from this. They're not who they say they are." The handwriting didn't look like Mark's, and when you knocked on his door, no one answered. The apartment felt eerily empty, and as you scanned the hallway, you noticed the flicker of a light through the cracks of his blinds. Someone was still inside, but it wasn't him. Your stomach dropped. This wasn't just a warning. It was another layer of the puzzle, another part of a game you didn't understand. You called Mark's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. The urge to go inside, to figure out what was happening, was overwhelming. But just as you stepped toward the door, you heard a noise behind you. A small, metallic click. You turned around and saw another figure standing in the shadows, a man with a hood pulled low over his face. His posture was stiff, deliberate. You couldn't make out his features, but his presence was undeniable, like an imprint left on the air itself. This was no random passerby. This was someone who had been waiting for you. Looking for something? The voice was low, controlled, with a hint of something dangerous just underneath. You didn't answer, but your pulse was racing, and for the first time in days, you felt trapped, as if every path you tried to take only led to another dead end. The man stepped closer, his movements deliberate. You should stop digging. Leave it alone. It's bigger than you think. The words echoed in your mind, sending a chill through your body. He was warning you, just like Frank had, just like the stranger had. But this wasn't some random bystander. This was someone connected to whatever was going on, and they weren't afraid to make their presence known. The tension in the air was so thick, you could almost taste it. The world around you seemed to close in, like you were a fly in a trap. Without warning, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. You stood frozen, every muscle tense, trying to make sense of what just happened. What was going on? Why were all these people trying to stop you from finding the truth? Who were they protecting? What were they hiding? And as if things couldn't get worse, you looked down at your phone to check the time and saw a new message waiting for you. It wasn't from your sister or Mark, but from an unknown number. The message simply read, "It's time to stop asking questions." The world around you suddenly felt smaller, suffocating, and for the first time, you realized just how deep this mystery ran. Someone was controlling the pieces, and no matter how hard you tried to uncover the truth, it seemed like every step you took only dug you deeper into a web of lies, threats, and danger. Whoever was behind this wasn't just watching. They were waiting for you to slip up, to make a mistake that would cost you everything. But the more you tried to understand, the more you found yourself wondering, was anyone in your life truly trustworthy? Or had everyone been hiding something from you all along? The answers were out there, but the price of finding them was beginning to feel too high. The next few days passed in a fog of unease, each moment dragging you further down the rabbit hole, yet every attempt to gain clarity only made things worse. The feeling of being watched intensified, an oppressive weight pressing against your chest every time you left the apartment. You couldn't shake the sensation, the prickling on the back of your neck that someone was always there, just out of sight, just out of reach. It was like living in a dream where reality shifted with every step you took, leaving you unsure of what was solid and what was just an illusion. One night, as you left the grocery store, your heart sank. There, just across the street, standing under the dim glow of a street lamp, was the same figure you'd seen days ago. The hood pulled low, their face obscured. This time, they didn't just watch you, they moved. Slowly, deliberately, following you from a distance, never too close, but never too far either. You tried to shake it off, tried to tell yourself it was just a coincidence. But deep down, you knew it wasn't. Whoever they were, they had been watching you. They were waiting for something. But what? You couldn't stop yourself from quickening your pace, crossing the street, hoping that somehow, you could lose them in the maze of city streets. Your mind raced as your footsteps echoed in the silent night, but when you turned the corner, there was no sign of the figure anymore. For a moment, relief washed over you, maybe you'd finally shaken them off. But as you took another few steps, the unmistakable feeling of being followed returned, only now it was worse, more immediate, more dangerous. You glanced behind you again, but there was nothing, no figure, no shadow lurking in the darkness, but the sense of being watched remained, thick and suffocating. The paranoia was starting to break through, turning every streetlight into a beacon, every stranger into a potential threat. Could they be watching from somewhere else, tracking you through hidden eyes, just waiting for the right moment to close in? You didn't dare go home just yet. The apartment felt like a trap, a place where every corner could hide something, or someone, waiting for you. Instead, you took a detour, wandering aimlessly, trying to outrun the fear that seemed to have settled inside you, like a permanent tenant in your mind. Your phone buzzed suddenly, pulling you from your thoughts. It was a message from your sister, short, to the point, "I'm scared. I think someone's been in my apartment. I saw someone outside my window tonight." A cold knot formed in your stomach as you read the message. You tried calling her immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic surged through your veins, and you found yourself rushing toward her apartment, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on you. What if they had found her, too? What if she was caught in this mess because of you? When you reached her building, the door was locked, and there was no sign of her. The lights were dim, and the silence felt suffocating. You rushed up the stairs to her apartment, your pulse racing with every footstep, but when you reached her door, it was ajar. The hairs on the back of your neck stood up, your instincts screaming at you to turn around, but you couldn't. You had to know. You pushed the door open, the creak of the hinges echoing in the empty hallway, and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, the only light coming from the flickering street lamps outside. Everything appeared untouched, but something was wrong. There was an oppressive stillness in the air. The feeling of unease was overwhelming. You called out for her, but there was no answer. No sign of her anywhere. Your heart pounded in your chest as you moved deeper into the apartment, each room more suffocating than the last. And then, in the corner of the living room, you saw it, a small, crumpled piece of paper, torn from a larger sheet. You picked it up, your hands trembling as you unfolded it, the words scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Stop looking. She's gone now. It's your turn." Your breath caught in your throat as the words registered. Gone. What did that mean? Where was she? Had they taken her? Was this part of whatever dangerous game was being played, or had someone been behind it all along? The message didn't make sense, and yet, the cold finality of it settled into your bones. Someone was playing with you, and they weren't afraid to take things even further. Whoever was pulling the strings had just escalated everything. Your sister was missing, and you were no closer to understanding why or how. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in on you. Every window, every shadow, Every creaking floorboard felt like it was part of the trap. You rushed to her bedroom, but it was the same empty, haunting silence. There was no sign of struggle, no indication that she had fought back, only an overwhelming sense of something dark lingering in the air. She had been here, but now she was gone, and you had no idea who or what was behind her disappearance. As you stood in the middle of the room, the overwhelming weight of fear and uncertainty crushing you, your phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from an unknown number. You hesitated before opening it, the dread crawling up your spine as you read the words that appeared on the screen. "You're next. You can't hide from us." You felt your heart stop. The world around you spun, the walls closing in even tighter. Someone had been watching you, someone had taken your sister, and now they were coming for you. There was no escaping it, no running from it. This wasn't a coincidence anymore, it was a carefully orchestrated plan, and you were at the center of it. But who was behind it? Who had the power to make you feel so helpless, so trapped? The sound of footsteps echoed behind you. You spun around, but the apartment was empty. Nothing. Just the echo of your own panic, the rush of blood in your ears. You wanted to scream, to run, but there was nowhere to go. The danger wasn't just outside, it was inside you now, too, creeping into your mind, clouding your thoughts. What had started as an odd encounter on the side of the road had turned into a nightmare, and you didn't know if you could wake up from it. You stumbled out of the apartment, your legs shaking, the overwhelming realization settling in. Your sister was gone. You were being hunted. And no matter where you ran, the truth remained the same. You were already too deep in the darkness, and there was no way out. The storm that had started so innocently had swept you up into a whirlwind of fear, confusion, and danger. And the worst part was that you still didn't know who, or what, was pulling the strings. All you knew now was that the clock was ticking, and time was running out. As you made your way down the stairs and out into the night, the weight of it all hit you like a tidal wave. It wasn't just your sister. It was you. It had always been you. And whatever this was, whatever this danger was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the days stretched on, the desperation to uncover the truth about what was happening only grew stronger. You couldn't shake the feeling that you were running out of time, that whoever was behind all of this was only getting closer, tightening their grip around you. Each new clue only seemed to raise more questions, and the weight of it all began to press down harder. But just when you thought you were about to crack the case, when you thought you had finally pieced together the fragments of a broken puzzle, everything shifted in an instant. One simple phone call, one piece of information that completely turned the entire situation on its head. It started with a message from Mark. You hadn't heard from him in days, and at this point, you were starting to wonder if he was truly the friend you thought he was. His sudden disappearance felt like just another thread pulled from the unraveling tapestry of your life, leaving you unsure of who you could trust anymore. You stared at the phone in your hand as his name flashed on the screen, your heart pounding in your chest. Part of you wanted to ignore it. You were tired of being jerked around by people who didn't seem to know or care what was happening to you. But the other part, the one still clinging to the hope that there was some kind of explanation, forced you to swipe to answer. "What is it, Mark?" you said, your voice barely a whisper as you tried to mask the exhaustion in your tone. Listen carefully, his voice came through the receiver, but there was an edge to it now, a coldness that sent a shiver down your spine. "I don't have much time to explain, but you need to understand something. Everything you've been seeing, everything that's been happening to you, it's not a coincidence. And it's not random." You tried to steady your breath, confused, overwhelmed. "What do you mean? What's going on? Where have you been?" Mark was quiet for a moment, and you could hear the sound of rustling in the background, as if he were trying to get away from someone. "You need to listen. I didn't want you to find out like this, but it's too late to stop it now. I wasn't supposed to tell you, but I can't let you keep digging without knowing the truth." He paused again, as if considering his next words carefully. "You were always part of this, even before all of this started. I didn't want to be involved, but I was drawn in the same way." Your stomach dropped, a feeling of dread settling over you. "What are you talking about? You're asking the wrong questions, and that's why you're in danger. This isn't just some random threat, and it's not about your sister. It's about you. You've been chosen. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy, and for a moment, you could hardly breathe. Chosen, you repeated, your mind racing as it tried to piece together the fragments of his words. What do you mean chosen? Chosen for what? Mark exhaled sharply, his voice now a whisper. I can't explain everything over the phone, but you've been set up for something much bigger than you realize. Your sister wasn't the target. Neither were you. You've been a part of something that goes way deeper than you think, a plan that's been set in motion for years. And it involves me. The silence between you both was suffocating as you tried to process the gravity of his words. What the hell are you talking about, Mark? What plan? What's going on? I can't explain it all now. They're coming for me, too. They've already taken me once before, and they'll do it again if I don't stay quiet. But listen to me. You need to stop looking for answers. You need to stop. The phone abruptly cut off. You stared at the screen in disbelief, your hands shaking. The call had dropped. You tried to call him back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic surged through you. What did he mean? What was he trying to tell you? And more importantly, why did it feel like everything you thought you knew was starting to unravel? You stood frozen in place, the weight of his words pressing down on you. Chosen. You could hardly process it. You thought you had been piecing together a story of betrayal and danger, but Mark's cryptic words now hinted at something far darker and more complicated, something you had never considered before. You weren't just a random victim in this twisted game. You were part of it. You were being manipulated in ways you couldn't even begin to understand. The feeling of being watched, of being trapped in some kind of elaborate scheme, suddenly felt all too real. You've been set up for something much bigger. Mark's words echoed in your mind, and as much as you wanted to dismiss them as paranoia or confusion, something inside you knew with a certainty that made your blood run cold that he was telling the truth. But what was the plan? Why had you been chosen? Before you could even begin to make sense of it, you received another message. This time, the sender was not an unknown number, but a name you hadn't seen in ages, Frank. The man who had warned you from the very beginning, the man who had vanished just when you thought he might have been your ally. You opened the message with trembling fingers. Stop digging. You have no idea what you're involved in. They're watching you, and they're waiting for you to make a mistake. If you don't stop now, it won't just be your sister you lose. Your breath caught in your throat as the words sank in. If you don't stop now, it won't just be your sister you lose. Frank wasn't just warning you about some external danger, he was warning you about something even more insidious, something that would cost you more than just your sister. You suddenly realized with a sickening certainty that whatever this was, it wasn't just a series of random events. It was a carefully constructed web, with you at the center, and you had been manipulated into playing a role you didn't even understand. The urgency of the situation hit you like a tidal wave. You weren't just fighting for answers anymore. You were fighting for your survival. Whoever was behind this had been pulling strings for longer than you could imagine, and now it was clear, they had no intention of letting you walk away from this. The stakes were higher than you ever realized, and now, with Mark gone and Frank's ominous warning in your inbox, you had no choice but to confront the truth. But as you sat there, your heart racing, it became painfully clear, you didn't know who your allies were anymore. Was Mark truly your friend, or had he been playing his own part in this game all along? Was Frank someone you could trust, or was he just another player in a dangerous scheme that stretched back years? The more you tried to uncover, the less you understood. And the worst part? The real truth seemed so far out of reach, so far beyond what you could even comprehend, that it was starting to feel like maybe you'd never understand it at all. The more you discovered, the more you were drawn into a world where nothing was as it seemed, where everyone had a hidden agenda, and where the rules of the game were something you were still trying to learn. And as the darkness closed in around you, one thing became clear, the biggest twist was yet to come. The weight of everything pressing down on you became unbearable, as if you were standing on the edge of a cliff, peering into the abyss. The walls of your life, once familiar and comforting, had begun to close in, warping with every new piece of information. The reality you thought you knew, your friends, your family, your safety, was unraveling, and with it, any sense of stability. You had been running in circles, trying to piece together the fragments of your life, but now, You were at a crossroads that felt impossible to escape. The more you discovered, the fewer choices seemed available, and each new revelation only made your situation more dangerous. The truth, however elusive, was coming closer, and so was the threat of everything you cared about being taken from you. And then, there was the message you'd been dreading, the one you hadn't been able to avoid any longer. Your mother, who had always been a pillar in your life, someone you trusted implicitly, was waiting for you at your apartment, and the words she had spoken over the phone that morning had echoed in your mind all day. "You need to come home, now. We have to talk." There was a fear in her voice you hadn't heard before, something that made the pit in your stomach drop. You thought about ignoring it, putting it off, pretending that maybe, just maybe, you could escape this web of lies for just a little longer. But deep down, you knew there was no avoiding it. Your mother had been hiding something, and now it was time to face it. When you walked into the apartment, the air felt thick, like the calm before a storm. Your mother stood there, her expression tight, her hands wringing together, a nervous energy surrounding her that you couldn't ignore. You tried to steady yourself, but everything inside you screamed that something wasn't right. You could feel the weight of the decisions pressing down on you as you approached her, the uncertainty gnawing at you. It was clear she had been keeping something from you. Something big. And the realization hit you like a slap in the face. Whatever she had to say, whatever truth she was holding back, it was going to change everything. "I don't know how to tell you this," she said, her voice trembling, as if every word had been rehearsed 100 times. "But you need to understand. This whole situation with your sister and Mark, it's not what you think. None of it is." You blinked, trying to process her words, the confusion and anger mixing in your chest. "What do you mean it's not what I think? Who else is involved, Mom? What's going on?" She took a shaky breath, her eyes flickering away from yours as if she couldn't bear to look at you. The silence between you both felt suffocating, and you could feel your heart racing as you waited for her to speak. "It's not just a random group, and it's not just a coincidence. We've known about this for years, and Your thoughts were spiraling. You couldn't follow her. Couldn't catch up to the enormity of what she was saying. "What do you mean, we? Who's we, Mom?" The fear in your chest was palpable now. Every fiber of your being was screaming for answers, but none of what you were hearing made sense. Your mother, your safe place, was part of something you had no idea about. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if steeling herself for something she had been avoiding for far too long. "It's not just you that's being targeted. This has been happening for years, ever since you were a child. The people who have been watching you, they've been watching all of us. And I never thought it would come to this." She shook her head, as if the weight of her own words was suffocating her. "They know about you, and they've always known about you." The panic that flooded your chest made it impossible to think clearly. "What the hell is going on? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me sooner?" Your mother's face twisted in anguish. "I didn't have a choice. I couldn't risk it. You don't understand, but the more you dig, the more dangerous it gets. The people behind this, they're not just after information. They're after something far worse, something I should have protected you from." She finally met your gaze, her eyes filled with a pleading desperation. "But now it's too late. They know you've been looking into it, and they're going to make you pay for it." Every muscle in your body tensed, as if the walls of your life had completely collapsed. "Make me pay for it," you repeated, your voice rising in disbelief. "What do they want, Mom? What do they want from me? They want control. And they're willing to do anything to get it." She stepped forward, her voice soft, almost breaking as she spoke. "I tried to protect you. I did everything I could to keep you out of it. But they're too powerful. I thought I could shield you from the truth, but I was wrong. Now they've found you. They've found us." In that moment, the world seemed to shift beneath your feet. Your mother's words crashed into you like a wave, and the weight of what she was saying was suffocating. The people who had been lurking in the shadows, who had been pulling strings all along, weren't just some random threat, they were after you, specifically. And they weren't going to stop until they had what they wanted. Suddenly, the phone buzzed in your pocket, and you jumped, startled by the intrusion. You didn't even need to check the screen to know that it was another message, another warning, another threat. You opened it with shaking hands, hoping for something that would make sense of all this, but the message made your blood run cold. You know what you have to do. Stop looking, and we'll leave you alone. But if you continue to dig, we'll take everything. You'll lose more than your sister. The ultimatum hung in the air, thick with the weight of impossible choices. You stared at your mother, your mind racing. What was the right thing to do? Was it worth it to keep searching for the truth when the price could be everything you loved? And yet, the part of you that had been looking for answers, desperate for them, refused to let go. The truth was too important. Your sister, Mark, even your own safety, all seemed insignificant now compared to the burning need to know who was behind this, to understand why your life had become a nightmare you couldn't escape. But your mother was right. Every choice you made now would cost you. The fear in her eyes was undeniable. If you continued down this path, you might lose more than just the people around you. You might lose everything. And still, the question lingered: if you stopped now, if you let them win, would you ever truly be safe? Or would you just be living under their thumb forever? The tension between you both was unbearable. You were caught between the truth and your own survival, between the people you loved and the unknown enemies who had been pulling the strings all along. Every decision seemed like the wrong one. And yet, the only thing you were certain of was that there was no going back now. Whatever you chose would change everything, and there was no way to know which path would lead to safety, or if there even was a way out at all. As you stood there, your heart racing, the weight of the decision bearing down on you, it became clear that you weren't just fighting for your own life anymore. You were fighting for the truth and for the future that you had once taken for granted. And whether you were ready or not, the consequences of your choices were about to unfold. The walls felt like they were closing in, and your mind raced, trying to connect the dots that had been scattered for what felt like an eternity. Your mother's warning echoed in your ears, but the truth was growing darker by the second. It wasn't just about you anymore. This conspiracy, it was bigger than anyone had realized. The storm, the messages, the disappearances, it wasn't some isolated incident. You had become part of something far more dangerous than you could ever have imagined. The people you trusted, the ones who had been by your side, were players in a game that you had no understanding of. And now, you were the pawn being pushed toward an inevitable, terrifying conclusion. You couldn't breathe. It wasn't just your mother who had been lying. Your best friend, the one you'd relied on for years, was caught in this tangled web, too. You had never questioned Mark's motives before, but the truth had been slipping through your fingers, and now it was too late to ignore. Mark wasn't just involved in this, you had been playing right into his hands. Every step you took, every clue you found, had led you deeper into a trap, one that you couldn't escape from no matter how hard you tried. And then there was the moment that shattered everything you thought you knew. Your phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with a new message. It wasn't the usual cryptic nonsense. This one was different, something far more personal, more dangerous. You opened it, your hands trembling as you read the words. You've been too focused on the wrong pieces. Your friend is not who you think he is. Mark has always been one of us. And now, it's time for you to join us or be eliminated. The words were a punch to the gut. Mark, your best friend, the one you had shared everything with, the one you thought you could trust, was one of them. He had been playing you all along. All the pieces were falling into place, but the picture it created was one you couldn't bear to face. Mark had been working with them from the start. Every piece of information you had gotten from him, every moment of advice, had been calculated to lead you here, to this exact moment. And now you were on the verge of losing everything. As you stood there, trying to make sense of what you were reading, your phone rang, and for a split second, you thought it might be Mark calling, apologizing, explaining. But when you saw the number flash on the screen, the blood drained from your face. It was your sister. You hadn't heard from her in days, and the sudden rush of hope was immediately crushed by the cold terror in your chest. Something wasn't right. You had to pick up. You had to know what she knew. With shaking hands, you answered. Sophie, you whispered, your voice trembling as you tried to keep the panic at bay. There was a long pause before she answered, her voice unrecognizable. It was distant, strained, as if she wasn't even there. Listen carefully, she said, her voice low and hurried. They're after you. They know everything. They know where you are. Mark is, she cut herself off, the sound of muffled voices in the background making it clear that she wasn't alone. You could hear footsteps, hurried ones, and the sound of something heavy being dropped. Sophie's voice trembled again. You have to leave now. It's all connected, Mark, the messages, the people after you. Don't trust anyone. The line went dead. Your heart stopped in your chest. You rushed to the door, but before you could take a single step, a loud banging echoed through your apartment. Someone was outside. You didn't even need to think. You bolted for the back door, adrenaline surging through your veins, and barely made it out when you heard voices, low, threatening. Footsteps. They were closing in. Whoever they were, they had been following you for longer than you realized. You didn't dare look back as you ran, your mind spinning as you tried to piece together what Sophie had said. You were caught in a storm of lies, deceit, and manipulation, and now, it was all crashing down on you. The truth was too twisted, too far gone. You didn't even know who was on your side anymore. Your thoughts were racing, but the sound of tires screeching behind you brought you back to the moment. They were gaining on you. You darted into an alley, hoping for a break, but as you rounded the corner, someone grabbed your arm. You spun around, panic rising in your chest. And there, standing before you, was Mark. He looked different, colder, more calculating, like a stranger wearing a familiar face. His eyes, once warm with friendship, were now filled with something darker. Something dangerous. You shouldn't have run, he said, his voice eerily calm. It's already too late. You've seen too much. Every part of you screamed to run, to fight back, but something in Mark's eyes told you that it wasn't just about you anymore. It was about everyone. About everything. The conspiracy, the shadowy figures pulling the strings, the ones who had orchestrated this entire nightmare, they were all connected, and Mark was no longer the friend you had known. He was part of something much larger, and now, you were tangled in it, just another pawn in a game with no clear end. Before you could respond, Mark raised his hand, and in that instant, something clicked in your mind. It wasn't just the two of you. Behind him, a dark van rolled slowly into view, its headlights cutting through the alley. You couldn't see inside, but you didn't need to. You knew, deep down, that whoever was in that van wasn't there to help you. They were there to finish what they had started. And the worst part? You realized, too late, that this was just the beginning. You had been running in circles, but the truth had been staring you in the face all along. It wasn't just about Mark. It wasn't just about your sister. It was about control. About power. And you had been a part of it, a part of something much bigger, from the very start. Mark's smirk grew wider, more menacing. You're not going to make it out of this. No one is. Your world felt like it was crumbling, and you were powerless to stop it. The stakes had never been higher, and you were now caught in a trap that you didn't even fully understand. The questions that had haunted you were now replaced by a horrifying realization. You weren't just a victim in this conspiracy, you were a piece of it. And now, there was no escape. As Mark turned to walk toward the van, you took one last look at the shattered pieces of your life. It was over. At least, you thought it was. But somewhere, deep in your gut, a small flicker of hope remained. Maybe, just maybe, you could fight back. The sound of your own heartbeat in your ears was deafening as you stood there in the alley, staring at Mark. The weight of the situation settled over you, crushing every last ounce of hope you had tried to cling to. The van behind him loomed like a monster, its headlights casting long shadows across the ground, making the entire alley feel like a trap, a place with no way out. Everything you had thought you knew was falling apart, leaving only questions, darkness, and a terrible, sinking feeling in your stomach that you were about to face the end. Your mind raced, but all you could hear was Mark's voice, so calm and cold, his smirk still lingering at the corners of his lips. I warned you, Mark said, his tone detached, as though this entire nightmare was just some twisted game to him. You should have stopped digging. Now look where we are. You thought you could change things, but you were just another pawn. You were always going to be part of this, whether you realized it or not. You tried to gather your thoughts, but the panic was rising again, stronger this time, like a wave crashing against you. What had you missed? Every clue, every strange piece of information, it had all pointed to something. But what? You knew the truth had been in front of you all along, buried in layers of lies and misdirection. This was the moment. You couldn't turn back now. If you were going to survive this, you needed to face whatever he was about to reveal, whatever game he had been playing. Suddenly, something shifted inside you, a spark of realization cutting through the fog of your fear. You could feel it now, the last piece of the puzzle. The events, the messages, the disappearances. The reason your mother had been so afraid. It wasn't just about you or Mark. This whole conspiracy, this whole mess, it wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was bigger. Far bigger. And the truth you had been avoiding was that it went all the way to the top. You weren't supposed to find out. You were never supposed to know. Why? You finally asked, your voice hoarse, trembling with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Why all of this? Why me? Why Sophie? Why anyone? Mark looked at you with cold, almost pitying eyes. It was never about you, really, he said, stepping closer, his every movement deliberate, measured. You were a means to an end. You and your sister, you're just part of the plan. This is bigger than any of us. The system, the people behind it, they've been pulling the strings for years, and everything was leading up to this. You're just the final piece. Your gut twisted as the words sank in, and you realized too late that Mark wasn't just your friend. He was a cog in the machine, a tool used to manipulate, to control, to keep the truth buried. Everything you thought you knew about the world, about the people you trusted, was a lie. And in that moment, you knew. You understood. The conspiracy wasn't just some shadowy group. It was a system, a network of power, and you had unknowingly become part of it. But just as that realization hit, a scream shattered the air, your sister's voice. You spun around, panic taking over. The sound was coming from the back of the alley, from the shadows where you hadn't looked before. Your heart stopped in your chest as you saw Sophie being dragged toward the van by two men you didn't recognize, their faces hidden in the darkness. She was struggling, her feet kicking against the ground, but they were too strong. Too fast. And then, in an instant, everything hit you like a freight train, the truth, the betrayal, the danger, it was all connected. Sophie had known. She had been a part of it too. "No," you screamed, charging forward without thinking, without caring about the consequences. You pushed past Mark, desperate to reach her, to save her. But just as you were about to reach her, one of the men turned, grabbing you by the arm with iron strength, pulling you back. Everything happened so fast. Your mind couldn't catch up, couldn't make sense of it all. You heard Mark laughing behind you, cold and mocking, and it made your blood run cold. "You should have stayed away," Mark called out, his voice laced with cruel amusement. "This was never meant to be your fight. But now it's too late." You twisted in the man's grip, fighting against the crushing weight of reality, the truth that you could no longer deny. Your sister, your mother, Mark, they had all been part of this. All of them had known. And you, just a pawn, had been the one left to figure it all out. You were nothing more than a small piece in a game that had been playing out for years. But then, something unexpected happened. A voice, a familiar voice, broke through the chaos. "Let her go." You froze. It couldn't be. But when you turned, there, standing at the end of the alley, was your mother. She was no longer the scared, broken woman who had warned you. She was standing tall, her expression resolute, her eyes filled with something you hadn't seen in years, power. Confidence. The kind of strength you hadn't believed she had in her. She was no longer a victim. She was in control. "You didn't think I was just going to let you ruin everything, did you?" she said, her voice steady, unwavering. Her gaze locked onto Mark, and for the first time, you saw the truth in her eyes. She had known all along. She had been part of it from the very start. Before you could react, your mother's hand shot out, and in a swift motion, she pressed a button on a small device she had pulled from her pocket. In an instant, the van's lights flickered, then went out. The men holding Sophie and you froze, their expressions morphing into confusion, then fear. You saw it now, the faint outline of a second van that had been parked just out of sight, the one that had been shadowing them all along. And as the men began to scramble, your mother took one last step toward you, her voice low and sharp. "We've been playing this game for years. But now, it's over. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Your mother, Sophie, even Mark, they weren't just part of the conspiracy. They had been working against it. They had been part of an underground resistance, trying to take down the very system they had once been forced to serve. The group that had orchestrated everything, the ones who had been pulling the strings from the shadows, were the true enemy. And now, they had all been betrayed. But just as you began to process the magnitude of what was happening, one last, final twist struck. In the distance, faintly visible in the flickering streetlights, a shadow moved, a figure stepping into the light. Someone you hadn't expected. Someone you trusted more than anyone else. It was Mark. But this time, he wasn't alone. The man beside him was familiar, too familiar. It was your father. The man you thought was dead. The man who had disappeared all those years ago, leaving you with nothing but a broken family and unanswered questions. Your heart dropped. The revelation tore through you like a thunderclap. The enemy wasn't just the shadowy group behind everything, it was your own blood. Your own family had been playing both sides all along. Your father, standing there in the light, gave you a cold smile. You should have stayed out of this, kid. And just like that, everything you thought you knew about your life, your family, and the world you lived in crumbled into dust. The air was still. It felt like everything had stopped, even the beating of your own heart, as you stood there in that alley, facing the truth that had been hidden from you for so long. The weight of the revelation about your father, the man you had once loved, the man you had believed to be dead, was suffocating. His cold eyes met yours, but there was no warmth left in them, no fatherly affection, only the chill of betrayal. The truth had been too much to bear, and yet, there it was, laid out in front of you, exposed. He had been behind it all. The disappearances, the lies, the twisted game you had been forced into, he was the puppet master, pulling the strings from the shadows. But as much as you wanted to hate him, to scream at him for everything he had taken from you, something inside you froze. He wasn't just your father. He was part of a bigger, far darker system. A system you had barely begun to understand. And yet, even now, as the weight of everything came crashing down, you couldn't deny it, the truth had set you free. In a strange, painful way, you felt lighter, more in control than you had ever felt before. The mystery, the years of searching for answers, had come to an end. The game was over, and though the victory felt hollow, it was yours. Your mother, your sister, and even Mark, they had all played their parts. The pieces of the puzzle had finally come together. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a perfect resolution. But it was closure, something you hadn't dared to hope for in the darkness of it all. You looked at your father one last time, feeling the weight of everything, every lie, every betrayal, every painful memory, and you made a decision. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing him. It was about moving forward. Letting go. You had been shackled by the past for far too long. It was time to break free. You chose your side, you said, your voice steady, though every word felt like it was being ripped from your chest. But I'm not you. I never was. There was no answer from your father, no apology or explanation, just a cold stare, as if he had already written you off. But that was okay. It didn't matter anymore. You had made your peace, and that was all that mattered. As your father turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows with the rest of the group, you turned to your mother. She met your gaze, and for the first time in years, you saw something in her eyes, strength. There was no more fear in her. No more hiding. She had been a part of this, yes, but she had also been fighting it from the inside. And now, she was free too. The silence in the alley stretched on, but it wasn't oppressive. It felt like the calm after a storm, the kind of peace that comes only when everything has been laid bare. Your sister, Sophie, approached you cautiously, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and confusion. There were no words left to say. What had happened in the past, what had been done to you, to her, to all of you, couldn't be undone. But you didn't need to say anything. The bond between you was stronger now, forged through fire, stronger than any betrayal. The conspiracy had crumbled, but it wasn't over. There were still shadows in the world, dark corners of power that would always exist. But as you walked away from the alley, the weight that had been pressing on your shoulders for so long started to lift. You weren't free from everything. Not yet. You knew that. The battle wasn't finished. But you had taken the first step, and that step had been enough to break the cycle. You weren't just a pawn anymore. You were in control of your own future. Still, as you walked away from the wreckage of your past, there was a strange unease in your gut. The world was quieter now, but it wasn't empty. You had learned that things were never as simple as they seemed. There was always more to the story, always another twist waiting in the shadows. As you glanced over your shoulder, you couldn't shake the feeling that, somewhere out there, something or someone was still watching. The conspiracy might be over, but the forces behind it weren't going to just disappear. You knew that now. And even as you took another step forward into the uncertain future, you couldn't escape the lingering question, was it really over? Or was this just the beginning of something even bigger? The final shot lingered on your face, the conflict of emotions playing out in your eyes. The answers were out there. But the questions, they would follow you for the rest of your life. And as the screen faded to black, you knew that whatever came next, whatever new mystery awaited, you would be ready. You had faced the darkness. And you had survived. But the world, it was still full of secrets.